They won't see it coming. The moment discipline becomes your weapon instead of your burden. While others struggle with motivation, you'll operate with cold, calculated precision. Their willpower breaks. Yours hardens like steel. This isn't about habits or routines, it's about wielding power through relentless execution. The kind Machiavelli whispered into the ears of princes. You've been lied to about what creates unstoppable discipline. Not morning routines, not accountability partners, not vision boards. The truly disciplined know something darker, something that works when everything else fails. It's why some people execute flawlessly while others make endless excuses. It's why some command respect with their mere presence. The difference isn't motivation. It's mastery of psychological leverage that Machiavelli understood centuries ago. Subscribe to Curiosity to Wisdom now. This channel transforms psychological theory into practical power. Like this video if you're ready to abandon feel-good advice for strategies that actually work. The principles you're about to learn have built empires and toppled kingdoms. They'll do the same for your discipline. You believe discipline is about fighting yourself. It's not. Discipline is about becoming ungovernable by others while governing yourself with ruthless efficiency. Every morning, millions wake determined to change their lives, only to surrender by nightfall. Their failure isn't lack of willpower, it's psychological weakness expertly exploited by modern distractions, engineered specifically to capture attention and fracture focus. The mind follows the path of least resistance unless you reconstruct its fundamental architecture through calculated intervention. This reconstruction begins with acknowledging the uncomfortable truth. Your current approach to discipline isn't merely ineffective, it's designed to fail by its very structure. The self-help industry thrives on your continued struggles, selling temporary motivation instead of permanent transformation. They profit from your cycles of determination and collapse. True discipline isn't motivated. It's calculated, cold, inevitable, sovereign. It operates beyond the realm of emotional fluctuation. The Prince of Renaissance political theory understood this when he wrote that men must either be caressed or crushed. There is no effective middle ground. Your undisciplined self must not be negotiated with. It must be systematically dismantled and rebuilt through psychological domination. This requires leverage, not inspirational quotes plastered on your bathroom mirror. When you understand the mechanics of your mind's resistance, its predictable patterns, its favorite excuses, its moment-by-moment strategies, you can manipulate it like a master strategist manipulates an opponent. Your excuses become transparent, visible mechanisms rather than compelling narratives. Your distractions lose their power when recognized as deliberate sabotage rather than innocent diversions. Your resistance becomes valuable intelligence rather than an obstruction to progress. The disciplined mind doesn't fight temptation through brute force. It reframes reality so temptation becomes irrelevant beneath consideration. It doesn't engage with weakness. It transcends the battlefield entirely. This isn't willpower in the conventional sense. This is psychological warfare against your weaker self, a campaign of strategic dominance rather than daily skirmishes. And like all warfare, it requires strategy, timing, leverage points, and calculated action, not just strength applied randomly. The disciplined don't try harder. They position better. They don't increase effort. They eliminate resistance through superior tactical positioning. They don't hope for better results. They engineer inevitable outcomes through psychological architecture that makes any other result impossible. Niccolò Machiavelli wasn't just a political theorist. He was the original psychological strategist who understood that power comes from manipulating perception, not just applying force. Men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, he wrote, understanding that appearances create reality in the minds of others and, crucially, in your own mind. Your discipline problem isn't lack of effort. It's psychological misalignment between your intentions and your unconscious programming. You apply force where you should apply strategy. You fight yourself when you should be directing yourself. The prince wasn't merely a guide for rulers. It was a manual for dominating the most dangerous territory, the human mind with its labyrinth of contradictions, weaknesses, and self-deception. Every principle in those pages translates directly to the battle for self-mastery that you wage daily and lose nightly. Machiavelli's central insight was that virtues become vices when misapplied to the wrong context. Your compassion for your weaker self isn't kindness. It's sabotage disguised as self-care. Your patience with your own excuses isn't wisdom. It's surrender packaged as understanding. Your flexibility isn't adaptability. It's inconsistency wearing the mask of reasonableness. The disciplined don't negotiate with their limitations. They transcend them through calculated action applied at precisely the right pressure points. When you understand that discipline isn't moral virtue but tactical advantage in the game of life, everything changes. You stop trying to be better, a meaningless standard, and start becoming more powerful, a measurable condition with concrete benefits. The undisciplined mind operates from emotion. It reacts, justifies, rationalizes, and ultimately surrenders to immediate comfort. The Machiavellian mind operates from strategy. It assesses, calculates, positions, and ultimately conquers through superior tactics. This distinction creates unstoppable momentum because strategy compounds while emotion dissipates. Your current approach treats discipline as a resource to be conserved, carefully spent on important matters. The Machiavellian approach treats it as a weapon to be wielded, strengthened through consistent deployment. When temptation appears, you don't resist it directly. You redirect its energy like a martial artist uses an opponent's force. When obstacles emerge, you don't overcome them through brute persistence. You incorporate them into your strategy, turning barriers into bridges. This isn't positive thinking or visualization, psychological techniques that create temporary emotional states. This is psychological domination, architectural restructuring of your mental landscape. The first step toward Machiavellian discipline is abandoning the belief that you should feel motivated. Motivation is fleeting. Strategic thinking is permanent. The truly disciplined don't wait for inspiration or optimal conditions. They execute regardless of emotional state, weather, convenience, or mood. This execution builds not just external results, but internal psychological authority over yourself, creating a sovereignty that becomes increasingly unassailable with each calculated action. The first Machiavellian tactic for unbreakable discipline: strategic inevitability. This isn't mere planning or scheduling, it's psychological architecture that removes decision points entirely from your daily battlefield. Decision points are precisely where discipline fails for the untrained mind. Each choice creates psychological friction, a moment where weakness can infiltrate through rationalization, fatigue, or distraction. Eliminate the choice entirely, and you eliminate the friction that drains your limited willpower reserves. The principle operates with mathematical precision. Fewer decisions equals greater execution. Create systems where the disciplined action becomes not just the preferred path, but the only path, the path of least resistance by strategic design. Example: don't place the alarm clock beside your bed where the snooze button beckons with its siren song of additional comfort. Place it across the room, requiring physical movement to silence it. Once standing, the hardest part is complete. Momentum has been established. The body in motion tends to stay in motion. The body at rest fights to remain at rest. The psychological principle underpinning this tactic: activation energy. The first action in any sequence requires disproportionate energy compared to subsequent actions. This initial barrier creates the illusion that the entire sequence is difficult when only the initiation presents significant resistance. Make the first action inevitable through environmental engineering, and the rest follow naturally like dominoes precisely arranged. The sequence completion becomes probabilistically inevitable rather than willfully achieved. When implementing strategic inevitability, methodically identify the precise moment discipline typically fails in your current patterns. This is your vulnerability point, the weak link in your execution chain. Now engineer your environment with cold precision so that continuing the disciplined action requires substantially less energy than stopping or changing course. This isn't motivation or inspiration. Those are amateur tools for amateurs. This is psychological leverage applied with surgical precision. In meetings, observe that the most powerful person isn't the loudest or most animated, but the one who speaks least, yet commands most attention through strategic positioning. Your actions should operate on the same principle. They shouldn't require force or strain, but should carry inevitable weight through proper structuring. When temptation arises, never fight it directly in a contest of momentary strength. Instead, redirect its energy by making the disciplined choice the only realistically available option. Remove alternatives completely from your environment. Don't merely reduce sugar intake. Remove every sugar-containing product from your house entirely. Don't try to watch less television. Unplug it completely and place the cord in your car, creating meaningful distance between impulse and action. This isn't deprivation or restriction. It's strategic elimination of psychological warfare before it begins. The undisciplined attempt to win battles through willpower at the moment of conflict. The Machiavellian wins before the battle begins, by controlling the terrain so thoroughly that conflict becomes impossible. The second Machiavellian discipline tactic: calculated consequence engineering. While the masses rely on vague rewards and punishments that dissipate under pressure, you will create precise, inevitable consequences that make discipline the only rational choice available to your future self. This isn't crude motivation through fear or primitive behavioral conditioning. It's sophisticated recalibration of your psychological cost-benefit analysis at the fundamental level. The undisciplined mind miscalculates the true cost of indulgence and overvalues momentary comfort. The disciplined mind corrects this calculation through engineered consequences that cannot be negotiated away in moments of weakness. Begin by identifying what you genuinely value in your current psychological reality, not what you believe you should value or wish you valued. Money, reputation, time, social approval, competitive advantage. Now create consequence systems that leverage these actual values, not theoretical ones that lack emotional impact. Example: give $500 to someone you respect and trust implicitly. If you fail your disciplined action, missing a workout, breaking a fast, failing to complete your priority task, they donate it immediately to a cause you fundamentally despise. Not merely dislike, despise at the identity level. The psychological principle exploited here: loss aversion. Human psychology experiences losses approximately twice as intensely as equivalent gains. This isn't a flaw, but a leverage point to be strategically exploited. Use this asymmetry to your advantage by designing systems that make the pain of indiscipline substantially greater than the fleeting pleasure of momentary gratification. For maximum effectiveness, make these consequences public rather than private. Private consequences can be rationalized away when no one is watching. Public ones create social leverage that exists independent of your fluctuating willpower. Tell 3 respected peers about your consequence system in explicit detail. Their knowledge creates additional psychological pressure through reputation, management systems embedded in your brain through evolutionary psychology. This isn't accountability in the traditional sense. It's strategic application of social power dynamics to serve your objectives. The undisciplined person fears judgment and hides their failures. The Machiavellian uses potential judgment as tactical advantage, converting social pressure from threat to asset. Your consequence system must be automatic and mechanistic, not negotiable or dependent on future decision points. Remove your own ability to renegotiate terms once established. Your future self cannot be trusted to maintain strategic perspective when under the influence of temptation. Sign legally binding contracts. Use applications that automatically transfer money or send notifications. Create systems that execute regardless of your future emotional state or rationalizations. Remember, the moment of temptation is precisely when your psychological reasoning is most compromised and distorted. Your present strategic self must constrain your future impulsive self through systems of iron, not through fragile intentions or promises that evaporate under pressure. Both tactics, strategic inevitability and calculated consequence engineering, must be applied in specific contexts to demonstrate their versatility and power. These aren't theoretical frameworks, but battle-tested strategies that dominate across all domains requiring disciplined execution. For physical discipline, don't rely on fickle morning motivation for exercise. It will betray you precisely when you need it most. Sleep in your workout clothes, eliminating the first decision point entirely. Place your shoes where you must physically step over them to start your day, creating unavoidable confrontation with your commitment. Prepay for classes that charge substantial, painful fees for cancellation, ideally 3 to 5 times what feels reasonable. The financial sting must overwhelm the temporary comfort of skipping the workout. Install a tracking app that notifies your selected peers when you miss sessions, leveraging social pressure as psychological propulsion. For work discipline, break monolithic tasks into components requiring less than 15 minutes each to execute. The resistance threshold for 15 minutes is substantially lower than for larger time blocks, creating psychological momentum that carries forward once initiated. Eliminate digital distractions, not through depleting willpower, but through technological barriers that create meaningful friction, website blockers with complicated password bypasses, airplane mode activated by others, physically separated devices locked in timed containers. For maximum effectiveness, make your most productive environment your most comfortable one, and your distraction zones deliberately uncomfortable. Hard chairs, cold temperatures, awkward desk heights. For financial discipline, create automatic transfers that move money to accounts, requiring 48-hour withdrawal notices or substantial penalties. The time delay introduces cooling periods for impulsive purchases, allowing the strategic mind to regain control from the impulsive mind. Set spending alerts that notify trusted advisors when transactions exceed predetermined thresholds, creating both delay and social oversight. For social discipline, pre-commit to events by paying non-refundable deposits and arranging transportation that cannot be easily cancelled without significant cost. Tell key relationships about these commitments, creating reputation risk for non-attendance. For learning discipline, don't rely on finding time, a fiction that never materializes. Schedule specific learning blocks with calendar notifications that require active dismissal, creating psychological friction for avoidance. Create public commitments to teach what you're learning to others by specific dates, forcing preparation through external pressure. The key distinction in each application: you're not trying to become a disciplined person through personal growth or character development, meaningless abstractions that dissolve under pressure. You're creating concrete systems that make discipline inevitable, regardless of your emotional state, energy level, or momentary desires. The systems execute without requiring your renewed commitment or emotional alignment. This is how empires are built, not through fleeting inspiration quickly extinguished by reality, but through cold, calculated systems that execute regardless of circumstance, mood, convenience, or resistance. Power comes not from trying harder, but from engineering inevitability into every critical pathway. Like and subscribe to Curiosity to Wisdom right now. Our channel doesn't offer temporary motivation. We provide permanent psychological transformation. If you've watched this far, you're ready to abandon conventional wisdom for something that actually works. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our tactical breakdowns of power psychology. Comment below with the first Machiavellian discipline tactic you'll implement today. The most crucial Machiavellian insight for discipline: your resistance to action contains valuable intelligence that lesser minds discard as weakness. When you procrastinate, your mind isn't failing. It's communicating critical data about psychological terrain that requires strategic navigation rather than brute force assault. Learn to decode this intelligence rather than fight against it with counterproductive willpower depletion. When resistance appears, that heaviness before starting, that sudden interest in irrelevant tasks, that fog of confusion, don't react emotionally or berate yourself like an amateur. Analyze the resistance clinically with the detached precision of a strategist examining battlefield conditions. Is it fear of failure, manifesting as perfectionism? Fear of success, creating identity turbulence? Unclear next steps, generating execution confusion? Resource depletion requiring strategic recovery? Status threat triggering avoidance? Each distinct form of resistance requires a precisely calibrated tactical response, not generic motivation or increased effort. Fear of failure requires specific risk mitigation strategies, breaking tasks into smaller components with independent value, creating multiple paths to success, redefining metrics for progress. Fear of success requires identity recalibration, reconciling your emerging powerful self with existing self-concept through deliberate narrative reconstruction. Unclear next steps require process clarification, creating detailed implementation intentions with specific triggers. Resource depletion requires strategic recovery periods, not as escape, but as calculated regrouping. By correctly diagnosing the specific resistance type with ruthless honesty, you can apply precise psychological leverage at the exact pressure point rather than exhausting yourself with brute force against the entire system, the undisciplined. The person experiences resistance as an impenetrable wall to be scaled through effort. The Machiavellian experiences it as a door with specific unlocking mechanisms to be manipulated with minimal force. This fundamental reframe transforms discipline from exhausting struggle to strategic calculation, from resource depleting to resource conserving. Implement the 4-step resistance protocol with methodical precision. First, observe the resistance without judgment, noting its specific qualities with clinical detachment. Second, identify its specific type and origin through dispassionate self-questioning. What precisely triggers the strongest avoidance? Third, select the appropriate psychological lever for this specific resistance variant. Fourth, apply minimum necessary force to redirect momentum rather than overpower it. Work with psychological gravity, not against it. This protocol conserves limited willpower resources while maximizing tactical effectiveness. Remember, sustainable discipline isn't about heroically forcing action against persistent resistance through superior character. It's about systematically eliminating resistance through psychological reconfiguration of the action landscape. The greatest power move isn't dramatically overcoming obstacles, but removing them entirely from your path through superior strategic positioning. When you master this approach through consistent application, discipline becomes not just easier, but inevitable. Your actions acquire gravitational force, pulling you forward without conscious effort, operating with the implacable momentum of natural law rather than fragile human will. Your practical Machiavellian discipline checklist begins with micro-behaviors that signal power to your own subconscious, subtle adjustments that reconfigure your psychological operating system at the foundational level. Speak less, but with greater precision and deliberate pacing. The disciplined mind doesn't overflow with explanations or justifications. It communicates with calculated economy. Lower your vocal tone slightly when making commitments to yourself, creating auditory authority markers. This subtle shift activates dominance psychology that measurably increases follow-through probability by signaling importance to your primitive brain structures. When you speak to yourself with the tone of command rather than request, neural pathways respond accordingly with implementation rather than negotiation. Eliminate all verbal and written hedges from your self-talk, those linguistic trapdoors through which discipline escapes. Replace weak provisional language like, "I'll try to work out today," or "I hope to finish this project," with definitive declarations. I work out today at 6 p.m. and I complete this project by 4 p.m. The linguistic shift creates psychological commitment structures that your brain processes as predetermined reality rather than optional aspiration. Your subconscious mind responds to linguistic precision with executable commands rather than negotiable suggestions. Adopt physical postures associated with dominance before initiating difficult tasks. Expanded chest, lowered shoulders, head alignment. These aren't theatrical displays, but biochemical triggers. Expanded posture increases testosterone levels and decreases cortisol, creating the precise biochemical conditions required for decisive action under pressure. Your body's chemistry precedes and enables psychological states, not the reverse. Implement the critical 10-second rule. When resistance appears, in any form, count to 10 while maintaining complete physical stillness, neither advancing nor retreating. This pattern interruption prevents impulsive abandonment of disciplined intentions by creating a buffer zone between impulse and action. Create consequence tripwires throughout your systems, specific measurable conditions that automatically trigger your pre-established consequence protocols without requiring renewed decision-making. These aren't motivational goals, but threshold markers that activate response systems with mechanical precision. Develop decision algorithms for common discipline challenges, precise if-then statements that eliminate decision fatigue at vulnerable moments. If offered unplanned food, then I say, no thank you, without explanation. If feeling resistance to starting work, then I set timer for 5 minutes of focus. These algorithms bypass the fatigued decision-making faculty entirely. Ruthlessly eliminate explanation habits in all contexts. The disciplined don't justify their actions to others or themselves. Justification creates psychological backdoors for compromise and weakens future execution. Track compliance data with cold precision, not just results. The metric that matters isn't progress, but execution percentage, how reliably you execute regardless of circumstances or feelings. This shift focuses attention on the process rather than variable outcomes, creating sustainable momentum independent of visible results. The final checklist item: daily power audits conducted with clinical detachment. Identify exactly where psychological energy leaked through system gaps and engineer precise solutions for tomorrow's inevitable challenges. The transformation from undisciplined to Machiavellian discipline requires complete identity reconstruction, not merely superficial behavioral modification that collapses under pressure. You must systematically abandon the weak narrative of someone becoming disciplined, a story of perpetual striving without a rival, and strategically adopt the identity of someone who already operates with calculated precision as their natural state. This isn't hollow pretense or positive thinking. It's strategic mythology, deliberately engineered to reshape psychological reality at its foundation. The Renaissance strategist understood that perception creates reality first in the mind, then in the world. Your self-perception determines your behavioral parameters more decisively than any external system. Understand the critical causal reversal that eludes the masses. Your actions don't flow from your pre-existing identity. Your identity forms around your consistent actions through neurological entrenchment. By controlling the actions with mechanical precision, you control the identity formation process itself. Identity isn't discovered. It's manufactured through calculated behavioral patterns. Begin referring to yourself, both in internal dialogue and external communication, as someone fundamentally defined by execution rather than mere intention or aspiration. These language patterns aren't merely descriptive. They're constructive, creating neural pathways and activation thresholds that facilitate corresponding behaviors with increasing automaticity. Eliminate entirely the vocabulary of effort and attempt. I'm trying to improve. I'm working on being consistent. I hope to maintain this habit. and replace it systematically with the uncompromising language of being and doing. I am disciplined. I complete what I start. I execute regardless of circumstance. This linguistic shift is the semantic window dressing. It's psychological architecture that reconstructs your operational reality from the foundation. Words aren't descriptions of reality. They are the building blocks of perception that precede action. Create detailed personal mythology around your developing discipline, specific narratives that your primitive brain processes as identity markers. Humans are fundamentally narrative creatures. Your subconscious responds to coherent story more powerfully than to abstract data or principles. Construct specific, emotionally resonant stories about your disciplined actions, emphasizing the calculated nature of your execution rather than variable emotional components. These narratives become self-fulfilling prophecies as your subconscious automatically works to maintain narrative consistency across contexts. Your brain will unconsciously generate behaviors that align with your dominant self-story. The truly powerful don't try to become disciplined through endless effort. They simply are disciplined through identity-level reconstruction. This state emerges not from motivation, inspiration, or determination, transient emotional states that evaporate under pressure, but from psychological inevitability engineered through Machiavellian principles applied consistently to the governance of your own mind. You become disciplined by behaving as if you already are, creating a reality that eventually requires no maintenance. You now face a threshold decision. Continue with the psychological comfort of undisciplined living, that familiar pattern of intentions without execution, plans without completion, potential without manifestation, or implement these Machiavellian tactics and become dangerously disciplined in a world of perpetual compromises. This isn't a casual choice between equivalent options, but a fundamental divergence point that determines your trajectory across all domains of existence. Most who encounter these principles will watch this video, feel temporarily motivated by the possibility of transformation, perhaps take superficial notes, then inevitably return to their existing patterns by nightfall, psychological gravity reclaiming what motivation briefly lifted. A select few will recognize the profound psychological leverage available in these systems and apply it systematically, understanding that power comes not from information, but from implementation with ruthless consistency. The critical difference between these groups isn't intelligence, education, or willpower, resources that fluctuate and fail under pressure. It's the fundamental willingness to abandon comfortable but ineffective psychological frameworks for uncomfortable but devastatingly effective ones. Comfort is the enemy of power. Familiarity is the adversary of greatness. Your specific challenge, the gauntlet thrown at your feet this moment. Implement exactly one Machiavellian discipline tactic today. Not tomorrow, when conditions might be better. Not when you feel more ready or motivated or certain. Today, within hours of completing this video. Start with either strategic inevitability or calculated consequence, engineering applied with surgical precision. Apply it to one specific discipline challenge you currently face, not a trivial matter, but something consequential enough to matter. Engineer the system completely, leaving nothing to chance or future decision. Remove all escape routes, rationalizations, and decision points that could compromise execution. Then execute the system with mechanical precision, regardless of emotional state, energy level, or circumstance. This implementation isn't about gentle self-improvement or personal development, vague concepts that dissipate under pressure. It's about calculated self-domination through precisely applied psychological leverage at exactly the right pressure points. The truly disciplined don't hope for better days or wait for motivation to appear. They engineer inevitable outcomes through superior strategic positioning that makes any other result impossible by design. The principles you've learned aren't merely techniques or tips, but psychological weapons that, when properly deployed with consistency and precision, make discipline not just possible or probable, but inevitable, as certain as gravity. The fundamental question isn't whether you can become disciplined, a question of capacity that distracts from the real issue. It's whether you're willing to abandon psychological comfort for psychological power, a question of commitment that few honestly confront. The undisciplined seek motivation, that fleeting emotional state that evaporates precisely when needed most. The disciplined create inevitability, systems that execute regardless of emotional alignment. Your actions, properly engineered through Machiavellian principles, require no emotional fuel or inspirational maintenance, only calculated execution with mechanical precision. When others hesitate in the face of resistance, you advance through terrain already conquered, through strategic foresight, not through heroic effort or superior character, but through coldly superior strategy applied before the moment of conflict arrives. This is the Machiavellian truth that separates princes' fear. Rome subjects. Discipline isn't moral virtue to be admired. It's psychological warfare you can dominate through strategic inevitability engineered with precision.